Hello, everybody. How you guys doing? My name is Mark. This is Why I Hate the World. What's happening? Great to see you all. Today we are continuing on with our series about the alt-right, and this episode is going to be all about recruitment, specifically using edgy, racist humor in order to recruit people as a recruitment tool, right? Before we get into that, let's take a look at our dragons here. So this is where we left off last week, kind of concentrating a little bit on our red dragon and looking pretty good. Today we're gonna continue on and do a little bit more of shadows and whatnot. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so the alt-right in general is seems to be just this sort of like movement online, racist movement in general, right? They're dominated by young people, right? Internet culture, mostly is dominated by young people because young people are the people that have time to hang out online and spend 17 hours a day messing around on YouTube and Reddit and stuff like that. And like for example, if you were to go to 4chan, 4chan has millions and millions of users, but a very large number of them are in the high school to college age, right? Like you would say the majority of them. Not all of them, obviously. There's millions of people that go on 4chan. There's professionals in every every age group in every industry, right? But a large number of them are, kids, right? And this is part of the reason why you get things like meme culture that comes out of places like 4chan and other, like, say, Discord servers and stuff like that, because they're filled with young people, and young people are a wellspring of creativity, right? Cordy Course, how you doing, man? Um, Today is Joseph Stalin's 143rd birthday. Wow, the more you know. So that's where a lot of this stuff kind of comes from. A lot of just the meme culture that you see out there, um, you know, on the internet in general, sort of springs from these well springs of creativity that come from young people, right? And this has kind of been weaponized by the alt-right, by the racists, by the white supremacists, things like that, and has been sort of twisted around. You know, um, just meme culture in general has been twisted around and used as a recruitment tool. You know what I mean? Um, and it appeals to young people a lot for um, certain reasons. First off, it's funny, right? So that's one way of kind of breaking the ice with your potential recruit, right? You post online some funny stuff. It gets people laughing, that kind of thing. And then you start sort of introducing, maybe some less than savory elements. Maybe you start talking about racist stuff, you know. Uh, and then people were laughing before. It's like, oh, well, you were laughing at the black jokes, at the Jew jokes, that kind of thing. And it what that does is that will kind of break the ice with people. It sort of normalizes it, that sort of that talk, that behavior, and before you know it, pretty soon it's not a joke anymore, right? Why is this? Oh, it's because I have the opacity set. I was like, how come this shit isn't dark enough? Because I had it set to like 69%. Right. And so when it's at first, it's like, oh yeah, okay, we're gonna start making jokes. We're gonna start posting memes about, soy boys and Pepe the Frog and shit like that. And then you start graduating, a little bit more and a little bit more, and then pretty soon you're talking about Holocaust denial, and you start posting some men's rights baloney, that kind of thing, some misogynist stuff, right? Some anti SJW kind of memes, that kind of thing, and then the kids are laughing along with it, blah blah blah, and then before you know it, you start talking seriously about things like Holocaust denial and race and IQ and how it's all a plan by the evil communist Jews in order to destroy Western civilization, shit like that. And it's sort of like a method of programming almost, right? And especially when you're young and you don't know any better, then it's very easy to fall into stuff like this, right? Because you're young, because you're a kid, because you have no experience. You probably have never read about anything like this before. You have no idea about the history of racism or anti-Semitism or, you know, the fact that, like, for example, because a lot of these ideas are not new, right? Louis the Hedgehog, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining. People like Holocaust deniers, that kind of thing, like pro-fascist movements, they've been around for decades, decades and decades and decades, and they've always been easy to dismiss as cranks because in the past they never had any um, access to mass media. You know, no one, for example, would ever air a documentary about Holocaust denial on a major network, for example, in the past. That would just never be a thing that would ever happen. Well, you have the internet, you don't need a major network anymore to reach millions of people. You can just drop a video on YouTube or something, right? Or Facebook or whatever, right? And it can potentially reach millions and millions of people. So a lot of social media has done a pretty good job of policing that stuff. There was a time when it was sort of like the Wild West about, 6 or 7 years ago, but they've done a pretty good job of starting to get rid of a lot of that crap. And, as we discussed in prior streams, there are now sort of the alt tech type websites that are out there, things like DTube and another one's called Odyssey and that kind of thing. And then there's all kinds of like right-wing Twitter ripoffs, Parler and Getter and Trump's new fucking ripoff scam Twitter clone that he's trying to come up with that he's being sued for. I don't know if you guys heard about that. Like he's being sued for fraud even before like the shit launches. It's hilarious. You know, Stuff like that. So there's venues is what I'm trying to say. There's venues for these people now. They don't need to go through mainstream communication networks anymore. Mainstream media outlets, that kind of thing. They have built their sort of alternate reality networks. You know what I mean? Their alternate, um, media sort of infrastructure, right? And so even though the numbers are smaller there, they still kind of don't need it. There are thousands and thousands of people that use these sort of alt right media, tech companies and shit like that every day, right? And so anyway, why are kids so susceptible to this? Why are young people specifically so susceptible to this kind of viral recruitment into hate groups like this, And it's not just hate groups, that's the thing, right? It's not just organized hate groups, although that is a big part of it. A lot of the groups that we talked about in prior streams, like for example, Identity Europa or something like that, right? Or the group that like America First, Nick Fuentes's group, you know, like why exactly are children and young people, high school to college age, why are they so like vulnerable to these types of groups, right? Well, it's because when you're young, during that age, you're trying to come up with your own identity, right? A lot of people, like especially when college age, you know, but late high school to college age, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, right? You're trying to figure out who you are, right? And a lot of that has to do with breaking away from your parents. So there's a little bit of rebelliousness going on there. A lot of this type of alt-right content is sort of seen as like taboo, right? Especially if you have parents that are a little more egalitarian, right? And it might so there's a little bit of like rebelliousness going there. It's like, oh, my parents hate this, right? So that's one aspect. I'm not saying that every person who's like in the alt-right did it as a way to like rebel against their parents and shit. But that's definitely one reason why you know, young people of that age gravitate towards extreme ideas, right? Because it's not just, wait, what the hell is this? Go, hey, get the fuck out of here, right? Anyway, um, sorry, I need to just uninstall that shit. Um, it's not just, hate movements, which people are attracted to. It's also during this time frame you're more likely to join a new religion, for example, right? Most people when they convert, it's in their late teens, early 20s, and they tend, to any religion, right? And they tend to stick around for a little while, you know. And that's why, like, if you were to go to any college campus, you usually see people passing out literature for religions, for evangelical Christians and shit like that, and Scientologists and Hare Krishnas and shit. They target places like college campuses because there's a lot of young kids there who are trying to find themselves, right? And they're open to exploring new ideas. This is the time in your life when you become an activist. When you're a kid, most people become politically active for the first time in this age range. And it's because you're a kid and you just learn about all this stuff. You read a book for the first time in your life and you get angry, right? You realize how much you've been screwed your entire life, and whether you become a Republican or Democrat or progressive or conservative or whatever, this is usually the time when it happens because you're young and impressionable and you've been exposed to these things for the first time you know so that's kind of the time in your life when you develop you're developing your personality, right? You're creating the habits and the long-term opinions that you may have for the rest of your life, right? A lot of experiences that you have during this time of your life will go on to um, influence you forever. How many times have you been sitting around talking with your buddies and it's like some shit that you think of is because of an experience you had when you were 19, 20, when you were in college, something like that, something you learned in college, right? That's exactly what it is, right? And people tend to get very fervent about these new ideas that they pick up. you know People don't, when you convert to a religion for the first time, you don't just sort of join it and then go to church and hang out in the background or whatever. Like, especially if you're a new convert, you're convert, you're very fired up. You ever notice that? You ever notice that it's like the people who are the most into it are the newly converted people, right? Because you have, and this is not just this is just people in general. This is just human nature. People tend to go all in when it comes to stuff like converting to a new religion or following a new philosophy even. It doesn't even have to be, or starting like a new job. You know what I mean? Like when you first start your new job, you're like really excited and you just want to jump into it and do everything you possibly can and be the best you can possibly be at it. Like nobody ever starts a job and then day one is like, this fucking job sucks. It's like, no, you wouldn't have like tried to get the job if you thought it sucked immediately right off the bat. I mean, unless somebody was making you fucking get it or something, right? So that's kind of what goes on here. The same, this is the same story. It's that same principle. new converts to reactionary ideas and reactionary thinking will be very fired up about it. And they'll, those are the ones that show up at the rallies. Those are the ones that storm the Capitol building, shit like that, that go to Charlottesville and get in fights with Antifa, shit like that. Those are the people, right? The guys that have been in this shit for decades and stuff. They don't, they know the risks already. They're the ones hanging out in the background who actually make sure their faces are covered and that kind of thing. Right? So, and it's because, um, they focus now. Okay, so you may have noticed, right, that a lot of the movements that you would associate with what's called the alt-right, things like Gamergate, Comicsgate, you know, they also have a big presence in furry communities, right? In pagan communities, stuff like that. Things like tabletop wargaming, like Warhammer 40,000, right? That kind of thing. Video games, especially, video game spaces, right? They kind of seem to be overrun with these types of people. And this is not to say that everybody who's a furry is part of the alt-right. Everybody who's a furry is not a fascist, right? Everyone who watches comic book movies is obviously not a fascist, but they do seem to be overrepresented in these spaces. I mean, anyone who used to go on Xbox Live back in the day can tell you just the horrible kind of just racist fucking attitudes that everybody seemed to have. Racial slurs being thrown back and forth and misogyny, shit like that. So you may have noticed that, and that's kind of been a phenomenon for a few years now, right? Why is that, right? Why are these types of communities susceptible to, you know, um, hate groups, to spreading, to groups that want to spread ideology, racist, hateful ideology like this? And this, my opinion on this may piss some people off, but I think it's got merit. It's because these are what you would traditionally call nerd communities, right? Um, furries, video game people that watch video games, right? Another one is anime fans. You know, there's a large number of these people who are in like anime circles as well, right? That kind of thing. Computer enthusiasts, right? It seems like they recruit a lot. A lot of these people just sort of always seem to fall down the alt-right rabbit hole. And, these are the people who get pissed when a Captain Marvel movie comes out, or because, Avengers Endgame had too many women in it, or they're mad because Captain America's black now, shit like that. And, they might not be going out there um, goose stepping at a rally with like a fucking wannabe Captain America shield beating up like, pink haired lesbians or something. But they are supporters and they may vote in certain ways. And who knows, they may even get hardcore into the stuff and actually show up at rallies and things and do harm to people. Why is that? Yeah, it's because these are sort of nerd communities, right? And usually these types of communities attract certain people that are searching for community, right? That's a big reason why people get into fandoms in the first place, is because it's a substitute for companionship. And I don't mean to be, mean by saying this. You guys have seen my other channels, I'm into this stuff too. Right? You know that I have a massively huge toy collection, which is starting to get a little too big. My toy collection is starting to demand voting rights. I have to go through and cull the sick and the old here out of the herd. I'm into comics. I mean, you see what I do. I draw comics. I'm into this shit. So it's like I'm not trying to criticize anybody who's attached to a particular fandom or is into just pop culture in general. But I think it's undeniable that the fact is that a lot of people who are into this kind of stuff also tend to fall into these sort of alt-right circles, right? And it's because the people that when you become when you get into nerdy things like this, it's usually because in real life you don't have a lot in the way of friends. You know, you generally tend to be an outcast. And that's a phenomenon that I don't think anybody can deny. The local comic book shop as a gathering for social outcasts. That's exactly the thing. It's like, if you were popular and you had social skills, you probably wouldn't be reading so many comic books. Not really. You probably wouldn't get into them as much as some of the really hardcore collectors do, you know. And this can lead to lots of different things. For example, it can lead to like let's say for example, what it is that the alt-right will see this kind of thing and they'll capitalize on pre-existing biases that certain people may have, right? So if you take something like, say, Comics Gate, for example, right? A lot of comic book nerds will get a little angry when they see people who they believe have not put in the same type of time into the fandom that they have kind of come and invade their spaces, right? And this is because, in the past, it's like exactly what I was saying. They kind of saw themselves as outcasts, and your local comic book shop was sort of like a gathering places for outcasts. And back before it was cool, they were into it. They could go to these places and get a little bit of camaraderie going with people. They had their own communities here, and it felt good to hang out with like-minded people who won't make fun of you, right? Then, you know, Avengers movies start getting made, then other people start getting into comics, and now you're seeing the normies show up. I'm sure you've heard that term before. This is a favorite term among alt-right people, the term normie, which is basically to normie is sort of like just square or, normal person, right? Um, but it's funny, the word normie is also used as like a way to describe people who are not losers as well. You know what I mean? Like they'll say like normies are people who actually have jobs and families, right? And can like, actually get girlfriends and shit like that, right? So there's sort of like a double meaning to that. And we could make an entire like, 10-minute video or something just on the use of the word normie, right? But so they see all these fucking normies showing up at their places where they hang out at, and they get a little pissed, and it's like, hey, what the fuck are you doing here? This is our place, you know what I mean? And alt-right recruitment sort of capitalizes on that, and it's like, that's why you get so many like things like Comicsgate, Kotaku in Action is another one, where somebody can like say Geeks and Gamers or The Quartering can make a 5,000 videos on Captain Marvel, because she's a girl. That's really the only reason why, and get like all kinds of views and shit because like people are pissed that they think feminism is fucking invading their comics and stuff, which is complete and total bullshit if you ask me. But that's what it is. It's that need for community because that need is a universal. That's something that everybody, doesn't matter who you are out there, we all need to have some sort of community, to have friendships. You know what I mean? To have people of like-minded people that we can confide in and have fun with. And that really is part of the reason of these sorts of fandoms attract people that are usually not capable of doing this, you know, face to face with real people, whether you have social anxiety, whether you're just like physically, unattractive, or you think you're physically unattractive or something like that, or whether you're just, I don't know, a loner, nerdy type person who doesn't give a fuck, whatever, it doesn't matter. They end up attracting a certain type of, personality into, fandoms like this, right? And it's very easy to prey upon those people and convert them to the alt-right, right? Um, that's the thing, because you could say it fits the pattern, right? For example, anime, right? There's like a big subsection of like anime fandom which also overlaps with like fascist ideology, fascist imagery, right? People doing things like putting their avatars with like little anime girls wearing Hitler uniforms, shit like that. There's also a lot of nationalism in anime as well. Um, a lot of that has to do with a few years back, there was what was called they called it the Korean invasion in anime, right? Where like a lot of in Japan, a lot of like Korean TV shows and pop, stars and stuff like that were imported into Japan. And so you started seeing this sort of wave of nationalism showing up in like, pop culture, right? And the thing is about, in the way that relates to the American alt-right is because the alt-right has never really had a problem with Japan specifically, like the Japanese were allies to the Germans, number one, during World War II. So they've always sort of been cool with like that. And plus, these are usually nerds that are into anime and shit like that. And so they want to like it. So they'll come up with some fucking excuse. You'll see memes and stuff talking about how the Japanese are our white brothers, that kind of thing. And then they'll post pictures of extremely attractive Japanese women and see, their skin is white, blah, 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 blah. And they should be considered white like us. That's no bullshit. I'm not making that up. So they've always sort of been cool with like, just Japanese culture in general. I saw an interview once where Richard Spencer actually said, that he was fascinated with Japanese culture and, liked anime as a recruitment because said specifically that anime could be used as a recruitment tool. And it's really, the main reason being is that that's what the kids are into. So like which one, I guess you could say this is a chicken or the egg situation. Which one came first? Are they cool with anime because the kids are into anime, or were they already cool with anime first and then they want to use it as a tool? It really ultimately doesn't matter, you know. But the fact remains that there's a lot of just in the alt-right in general, there's a lot of like anime fans and stuff like that. And the reason, being is because yeah, like anime being mainstream is really a much more recent phenomenon, maybe over the last 15 years or so is when anime started actually becoming mainstream. Before that, back in the 90s, the 80s, specifically the 80s and 90s, it was not that easy to be an anime fan. Back then you had to do things like you had to trade bootlegged like fan subs if you wanted to watch something, right? And you had to, so it was very much like a big overlap with like, comic book type culture and stuff like that, gaming, right? And in the 2000s and the aughts, if you wanted the good stuff back before it got really popular, you had to have a little bit of technical know-how in order to find the right sources and download these things, using things like, BitTorrent or whatever, right? Like stuff like that, right? Or I guess you could even before that, shit like Napster, you know what I mean? But it was another layer that separated them from the normies, right? Not everybody knew about this stuff, and it took a little bit of work to actually like get into it, right? And now it's super popular, and of course, this breeds animosity towards the original hardcore otaku fans and shit who now think that they're just like with comics, their favorite hobby is being taken over by normies and shit, you know. Um, but that was sort of a thing that you would get made fun of back in the day, if you were like really too hardcore into like anime or whatever, people would make fun of you for shit like that. Same kind of thing with gaming. Gaming was, oh, sorry about that. Gaming was, a thing that was up until maybe 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe around 2000, right? Gaming was usually seen as something for children, the same way that anime and you know um, comic books were, right? And back then, if you wanted to play online, first off, there was no online until you know the mid 90s, right? Now there was no reliable way to play online. Right. You did have things like the X-band modem and stuff like that for Super Nintendo, shit like that, right? But it was very unreliable. And if you wanted to actually play online against people in the days before Xbox Live, you had to know how to do it. You had to have the technical skill. Basically, you were a computer geek. That was the way to do it. And that was something that people would get made fun of. And it's surprising nowadays, isn't it? When everybody in the world has a computer and they're so like integrated into our daily life, to think that knowing how to use a computer used to be something that people would make fun of you for back in the day. But it's true. It's absolutely true. Anybody here who's over the age of 30 remembers, right? Remembers the computer geek stereotype, right? And it's just funny because all those computer geeks from the 80s and 90s are now like tech millionaires and shit. They ultimately got the last laugh there. But still, that was definitely a thing, and gaming in general was basically seen as something for children. You know, um, People, you would get made fun of for playing too many video games, stuff like that, which is also really hard to believe because now everyone and their grandmother plays video games. I mean, specifically my mom, who's like fucking in her 60s and shit, plays games now. It's like when even like little old ladies are playing video games, it's safe to say that it's mainstream. Of course, now you have things like you always have that sort of segment of hardcore gamers who are really into video games that have a high sort of price of entry, right? And that was a thing even going back to, I mean, back in the day, the 16-bit era, when you started getting fighting games and really complicated RPGs and that kind of thing. It started to diverge. So even today, there still are these communities of super ultra hardcore gamers who are like, you know, the nerdiest of the nerdy, right? And these are the people that fall into the alt-right. Like we were just discussing earlier today, you know, uh, any Xbox Live channel, back in the day. I don't know how it is so much now because I don't really play so much as I used to nowadays. Like I used to be really into the shit, like especially gaming. I actually have a video game website that I used to run called Ultimate Console Database. Lots of pictures of hardware and Famiclones and stuff like that. That was something that I ran. I haven't updated it in literally 15 years. I think the last time I updated the site was like 2009. It's been a long time, but it's still up. I was really into it. I actually have a very huge game collection for, you know, that I haven't really been keeping up with, mainly stuff from the 16 to 32-bit era, but I do have a Switch. I have a PS4. I play mainly stuff on computer, PC games nowadays, but still kind of vaguely into it. But yeah, I'm sure, these spaces have anybody who's been a gamer knows that it's just sort of overrun with toxic gaming culture, right? And a lot of that is also ripe picking, fertile picking grounds for the alt-right there, right? So this is why you see so many channels, YouTube channels and whatnot, making content designed to piss people off, sort of outrage merchant type content, having to do with female characters in video games and that kind of thing, and The Last of Us or whatever, shit like that, right? So anyway, let me just scroll down here. Wow, we're already at 11:37. God damn. The time just fucking flies here when you actually have something that you want to talk about. Anyway, the point is these communities tend to be people who are not the most popular in their ordinary daily lives. These are the people that usually get made fun of at when they're in school, stuff like that. They tend to be alienated. So they tend to be filled with people who would self-identify as outcasts, right? I'm not the one saying this. This is what you would self-identify as. And they get a little bit of pride when they, in their in their favorite hobby or whatever, they take it very seriously, and they get a little pissed off when they see normies coming in and invading, and then fucking whatever, right? And it's basically a very, very fragile recruitment ground for radicalization, right? So what's the way, one of the methods here, because this is going to be a multi-part series because there's probably lots of other alt-right recruiting methods, but probably the most effective and popular and widespread alt-right recruitment method that I can see has to do with using memes and edgy humor, rude, crass humor, stuff like that, in order to recruit people, right? And that's how you do it. You kind of just introduce it as a joke first off. So somebody like cracks a joke, a joke about black people, and then that they get a laugh out of that, and then they crack a joke about Jews, and then a rabbi and a penguin and a Jew going to a bar or whatever, that kind of thing. They crack that joke, and then they start posting memes and stuff like that, and then before you know it, they're talking to you about the fucking Jewish question or some shit, right? And you're posting about race and IQ because you've been sucked down this fucking rabbit hole, and that's kind of how it works, right? And the way they do it is through the big way, is through memes, posting memes on social media, stuff like that, right? And it gets people, it gets what it does. The most the one thing that it does is that it gets people to dehumanize, excuse me, gets people to dehumanize the other. You know, it gets you comfortable with the idea of an us versus them, right? This idea that these are people that it's okay to make fun of. It's okay to make fun of Jews. It's okay to make fun of black people. It's okay to alienate trans people. And, starts getting that, so you start dehumanizing them a little bit. And that sort of opens the door for when, the alt-right comes in and claims that these people are like subhuman, right? Or that they're degenerates or some shit like that. Right. It makes it that much easier for you to accept that if you've been posting frog memes about how, like, all trans people are pedophiles and shit for the past, couple of months. Right. So, and it also, one method there is that it gives an out. So if somebody were to actually come on, like, let's say you're in a forum or a subreddit or something like that, and somebody were to actually complain about the anti-Semitic memes or, racist jokes or whatever, it gives the person doing the recruiting there an out because then they could just say, hey, it's just a joke. No one's taking it seriously. You know, why don't you just relax? Nobody really thinks about blah, 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 blah. This is not really Holocaust denial. We're just joking about it. It's being done ironically, right? That is not something that, I'm just making up. This is actually out of the horse's mouth. Um, there's an article that Milo Yiannopoulos co-authored for Breitbart in 2016 called An Establishment Conservative's Guide to the Alt-Right. I'm not going to link to that because I do not want to be responsible for um, driving any traffic directly to Breitbart because I think they're a cancer on the planet and should be eradicated. But you can look it up if you want to. And there was a quote there from Milo Yiannopoulos where he said, talking about memes and jokes and stuff like that, right? He said, this is his quote, are they actually bigots? No more than death metal devotees in the 80s were actually Satanists. For them, it's simply a means to fluster their grandparents, right? This is from the horse's mouth, Milo Yiannopoulos was heavily into the alt-right scene there. He was more of an alt-light kind of person, but he was actually very much into this shit in 2016. Like it's funny nowadays he's fucking like tried to convince everybody that he's gone Catholic and that he's no longer gay, and then he like runs one of those like pray away the gay anti-Christian, anti-gay Christian camps or whatever, which is total bullshit. It's really only a matter of time before, he gets exposed as being gay again because it's all a fucking grift. I do not believe him for a nanosecond, but anyway, that's besides the point. So, yeah, that's, right from one of the main participants in this stuff, you know, right out of the horse's mouth there. So, I want to take a little bit of time and actually talk about some of the more established memes that, of course, we see spread around. Biggest, of course, being Pepe the Frog, which is still very much a thing. It seems like interest in Pepe has kind of waned a little bit over the last couple of years, but still very much, people posting rare Pepes is still very much a thing. So I went over this a lot in part one of this series, so I'll just sort of touch on it briefly for anybody out there who hasn't seen the other parts of my alt-right series. But Pepe the Frog, I know that you know who he is. No need to show any graphics or anything. Was a character created by a guy named Matt Fury for his comic called the fuck was it called again? Boys Club. And Pepe the Frog has been co-opted by the alt-right and has become sort of an alt-right symbol, but Pepe the Frog himself is not specifically a racist creation. He's just been sort of co-opted by that. There are plenty of Pepe the Frog memes which are not racist. They're just, usually very crass there, but he is definitely a favorite amongst these sort of people. Um, The creator, Matt Fury, hated that so much that he actually killed off his own character. It pissed him off so much that, yeah, he killed his character off in his own comic series, which has got to be kind of annoying. And for the life of me, I don't understand why he isn't suing the living shit out of people who are using his character without his permission, specifically people like Richard Spencer. That very famous video of Richard Spencer being punched in the face. I don't know if you guys remember that from a few years back. I think it was like, what, 2017? Um, he was explaining to the person who was interviewing him what his Pepe the Frog pin was when somebody fucking decided to knock his ass out. So, yeah, that's a big thing, and it's very much a meme still, to post rare Pepes, which is like variants of the frog meme going around like that. But like I've said, I don't know. I think I said this in Part one, I think we need to take Pepe back for Matt Fury's sake. I think Pepe needs to be liberated from the alt-right, so that's why me personally, like when I see people posting it around, unless it's done in a racist way, it doesn't bother me so much. There's some people that can't stand Pepe and they really fucking hate it, and they'll like ban you from their discords and shit if you post like Pepe memes or whatever. Um, another one of the more prevalent memes is Kekistan, which was a big thing for a little while too. Kekistan is a fictional ethnicity created on 4chan. And where it came from was that on 4chan there was a thread about how they should buy a private island so that they can like enact a sort of white nationalist state on a private island. And the original thread said something like, "Hey, you can get an island for $1 to $2 million, right? So if everybody here put in $10, because 4chan gets millions and millions of people that come in every day, right? Every hour even. And if everybody gave $10, they could afford it. And then they started coming up with names for it, and they came up with Kekistan, right? So the word Kek comes from StarCraft. See, just to kind of illustrate how all of this shit is connected with nerd culture and shit like that. Kek comes from StarCraft, right? And what it is that StarCraft is extremely popular in Korea. God damn it, I need something to drink. Hang on a second, folks. Let me just get my root beer here because it is only 11:48 and I can't be drinking real beer before lunchtime. I'm not, that much of an alcoholic. Okay, so StarCraft is extremely popular in South Korea, right? It's like fucking approaching national sports status and shit. Even to this day, people still play StarCraft there a lot. And one of the favorite tactics in StarCraft is the Zerg Rush. If you've ever played StarCraft, StarCraft is kind of like it was originally supposed to be a Warhammer 40,000 game, right? So it has, you know, uh, corresponding armies to Warhammer 40,000. And one of them, of course, is the Zerg. And the Zerg are sort of like the aliens from the Alien movie, the chest bursters, right? That's sort of what the Zerg is. So, essentially. And a favorite tactic for Zerg players is called the Zerg Rush, where um, they make a whole bunch of little Zerglings and then all attack at once and just sort of overwhelm you, you know. And that became, a thing with South Korean players. And every time somebody would Zerg rush you, they would type kek, 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 right? Over and over because that was sort of the sound effect for laughing in Korean, right? In Korean, like K E K or K E, right, is what it is the onomatopoeia for laughing, right? So they would type that K E over and over, so it looked like kek 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 over and over and over and over and over, right? And that kind of became a thing, another meme for shit posters essentially. So people would say crack a racist joke and then type kek after it, right? So that's where Kekistan comes from. And it's like, when you research and examine the origins of where these memes come from, it's kind of like the stupidest fucking shit, isn't it? It's like this is what people are like fucking devoting their fucking lives to, right? Like a meme that came from a fucking like comic about frogs and then another one about like from fucking StarCraft. It's like it's and that's there you go. It's because these people are nerds, basically. This is what nerds do. Like I mean, I know that because I'm fucking extremely nerdy myself. I mean, fuck, right? So it's like it's ironic nerddom being weaponized for fucking hate speech and shit is what it is, right? So that's where the name Kekistan came from. And it was just all a joke, blah blah blah, until it was promoted by Sargon of Akkad. And Sargon of Akkad is a right-wing nationalist, racist YouTuber who actually ran for government position. He's in Britain. I think he ran for one of the like I think they call them MPs, which I'm not exactly sure what MP stands for, but it's some kind of like city like district representative or something like that, I think. Not exactly sure. And he ran for this and of course got annihilated because he's a white nationalist piece of shit and was just destroyed. And that was a good wake up call that, hey, your fucking YouTube channel doesn't translate to political power. Was very happy to see that. But anyway, he's the one that who popularized Kekistan, right? He didn't invent it. He popularized it, right? Because on the British census, it leaves open the space to put in your ethnicity is blank, right? So he decided to come up with Kekistani from the Kekistan meme as his ethnicity. And so people have gone on to create, flags and shit, right? Let me just see if I can find one that doesn't have any bad stuff. Let's see if I can find an image of the Kekistan flag. There we go. There's no bad stuff on this. So that's what the Kakistani flag looks like, right? I'm sure you have noticed here the similarities to a swastika there. It's very, very similar, to a Nazi flag, except in green with the 4chan clover up here. That, of course, is not a coincidence, right? Um, and people have started taking this shit seriously, So you have this kind of here at this is the Unite the Right rally, and among other sort of flags here, here's a MAGA guy. Let's zoom in on that a little bit so you guys can see it. Here's a MAGA guy over here. Here's a guy with the fucking dress, don't tread on me flag. Not exactly sure what this flag is back here. I think this is with God, I can't really say for sure, but it looks pretty fucking fascist to me. These guys are Proud Boys. You see these Proud Boys here? Excuse me, I'm burping. With their yellow fucking and black thing. And then you got a guy here waving the Kakistani flag right here. So it's like, yeah, it's just some dumb shit fucking internet troll thing that somebody made up, and then people suddenly, it's all a joke, it's all ironic, and then you see people hanging out at fucking white supremacist rallies carrying the shit. And it's like, huh, funny how it starts off as a joke. It's just a humor, it's just humor. It's just there to troll the normies. And then suddenly, when it, all the way up until when it's not just there to troll the normies, all the way up until the point where the people, waving these flags and posting these memes and shit are out there like beating up fucking like, protesters and running people over and shit in their cars. You know, it's funny how easily it suddenly, becomes like, I don't know how to put this. It suddenly becomes real, I guess is the way to, shit gets real very quick, I guess is one way to put it. Anyway, so yeah, that's Kekistan. That's a fucking joke. You still see that shit around all the time. Another one, we talked about Warhammer 40,000, right? There is a very, very, very big, just using as an example of how these types of spaces get radicalized by the alt-right. There's a very, very big overlap between Warhammer 40,000 fans and the alt-right. Massive, right? And it's because if you've ever played Warhammer 40,000, there is a lot of fascist imagery in Warhammer 40,000. There just is, right? Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing because Warhammer 40,000 is a parody, right? And what it is that it's a parody of authoritarianism, right? Because the storyline goes like, it's in the far future and mankind is sort of like spread across the entire galaxy and is surrounded on all sides by hostile aliens and demons and shit like that. And every uh, every human society is kind of broken down and become a totalitarian, like authoritarian nightmare. And that's the whole point of Warhammer 40,000 is to make everything as grim. They call it grim dark, right? And the point of Warhammer 40,000 is to make everything as grim and horrible and awful as possible, right? There are no heroes in Warhammer 40,000, right? The humans are horrible. They're genocidal. Like it's sort of the opposite of Star Trek. In Star Trek, the human beings are like enlightened. The Federation is enlightened, and they go out and they're pacifists. And even though like there's always wars and shit going on in Star Trek, like they always portray the humans as the good guys. They're enlightened. They do the best they can in order to peace before war, stuff like that. There's no discrimination in the Federation. Even back in the old days, like, cause even now, like, yeah, that was like Discovery and stuff like that has trans people and gay people and all that. But even back in the day, the 80s and 90s and the 60s and shit like that, like Star Trek has always been extremely progressive. Star Trek has always been sort of on the edge of of social justice and depictions of minorities and that kind of thing, right, in their storytelling. Warhammer 40,000 is the exact opposite of that. There's no peace. They don't no camaraderie with people who are different. If you don't believe in the God Emperor, they murder you. Right? If you alien, if you're an alien, they kill you. They don't try to talk to you. They don't try to negotiate anything. They don't try to come to any universal um understanding of shit. It's like you're a filthy Xeno, so you get destroyed. That's Warhammer 40,000, and it's all just everybody fucking everything. Everything is extremely bad. They eat what's called corpse bread made out of like dead bodies and shit like that. It's imagine, just like the worst possible universe that you could ever come up with. That's Warhammer 40,000. And they do it on purpose. They do it on purpose, in order to make it as bad as possible, right? Part of that is making the governments all sort of authoritarian, like, you know, um, theology, theocracies is what they are. The emperor is literally a god that people worship, right? And oh, wait a minute, did I just? Okay, everything's cool. Okay, sorry, I thought I screwed something up. Yeah, the emperor is literally like a corpse sitting on a chair rotting away that people worship and shit like that. Which is not to say Warhammer 40,000 is bad. I actually kind of like it. I don't play the tabletop game, but I read the books, and they're actually pretty good. Like sort of. I mean, it's not like deep literature or anything, but you know, they're kind of action packed. They got lots of action and they're gory and it's sort of like Dune. It's like Dune, but with all of the intellectual stuff taken out. That's what Warhammer 40,000 is. Anyway, right. And but there's a lot of fascist imagery. And the reason why, like you'll see like the troops and stuff wearing stormtrooper outfits and the commissars is what they call them, like straight up wearing like SS uniforms and that kind of thing, right? And the entire just storyline in general, where anybody who's not human is like considered a fucking filthy xeno. The alt-right has sort of co-opted all this shit, and made black people and Jews the filthy xenos. And you'll see things like this. Here's another picture I've got for you guys. This is God Emperor Trump. Trump as the God Emperor, right? If you've seen this before, this comes from Warhammer 40,000, right? Which is funny because they would post this because the thing is that they're misinterpreting what Warhammer 40,000 is all about. Warhammer, Warhammer 40,000 is saying that this is a bad thing, right? It's not glorifying fascism. It's it's a parody of essentially authoritarianism, right? It depicts the Imperium of Man is what it's called. It depicts the Imperium of Man as decrepit and past the glory days. Like civilization has already peaked and is like in decline. And the peak they call the dark age of technology. And then in this current Warhammer 40,000 universe, human beings are like disposable. You know, um, there are no such things as human rights. There's no democracy. there's there's nothing like that at all. And people are basically just like sacrificed by the fucking billion in order to fight wars with because everybody's a fucking xenophobe, where if they were to just cooperate with some of the aliens, maybe they could defeat some of the bigger threats that are out there. Like they could defeat the Tyranids or some shit, or Chaos, if they were to cooperate with the Odari or another faction. And there's even other factions like that are like more progressive. But when you read the lore on them, even those are still sort of authoritarian groups. So it's like there are sort of no good guys. Everybody's out for themselves and shit. And so they're kind of misinterpreting that. So when they post a picture, like the Emperor in Warhammer 40,000 is a corpse. He's like being kept alive by machines and shit like that. And had this plan to unify the human race and ultimately failed extremely bad. Like the Emperor's plan in Warhammer in the storyline was to create a unified human race that is free of ignorance and like religious dogma, and he ultimately failed, and people are worshiping him as a god. So it's like the exact opposite of what the emperor wanted is what actually happened. So it's sort of like when you depict Trump as the emperor of mankind, you're kind of calling him a loser, is what you're doing. But the thing is, um, these are racists and white nationalists we're talking about, so they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. They're not going to understand, you know, the meaning of this kind of irony or parody. They just take it at face value. They see the miniatures and the soldiers wearing Nazi shit, right? And they think that's what the game is really about. And it's not about that. And even last month, uh, the company that owns it is called Games Workshop. They even put out a statement basically saying that disavowing anybody who's like in these fucking hate groups. Because what happened last month was that there was a tournament, and one somebody showed up at one of the tournaments wearing like Nazi shit on their like t-shirts and stuff, and people refused to play with him because he's fucking Nazi, right? People refused to play with him, but according to Spanish law, they couldn't kick the guy out because he didn't do anything. So he ended up winning by default because nobody would play with him, right? Stuff like that. So it's like, and this caused Games Workshop to like put out a statement for the first time ever, basically fucking disavowing any connections, or any support with racist hate groups, right? Which is good for them at least. At least they've got, at least they're fucking like trying to own it and take control of it and basically like, not endorse any of these fucking people that are misusing misusing their imagery or whatnot. So if anybody out there, if you've never like heard of Warhammer 40,000, it's actually kind of awesome. I recommend the books. I can't really talk about the games. I know there's a few video games, and they actually created their own streaming service for some reason, which I haven't checked out. Because I'm not going to pay for another streaming service just to watch Warhammer shit. But what it was on, this is kind of a side note. On YouTube, there were a lot of sort of fan creators who created their own sort of like fan films and stuff like that. One of them is called Astartes, which is really good. And so then, now these people are, all the fans are not allowed to make stuff on YouTube anymore. They have to like get it if they want people to see it. It has to be on this like streaming service, which is like I'm not paying for that shit, right? But I do recommend the books. It's actually pretty good. And that's just, the thing about all this, right? None of this stuff is inherently racist. Warhammer 40,000 is not inherently racist. Pepe the Frog is not inherently racist. Kakistan, yeah, okay, that is. That definitely is. But, it's just, because there are plenty of these sorts of memes that are put out by anti-racist people, by Antifa, stuff like that. But it can be also a funny way to counter the trolls. So I'm also not trying to claim that meme culture in general is inherently racist, right? But it is definitely a method by which they use to convert people. They use to spread ideology around. And so you have but it can also be a way to deconvert people. That's another thing. You know, you can use basically fight fire with fire. And, you know, what's the best way to kind of spread your ideology? Like poke fun at people, right? So there's no reason why we shouldn't just post memes that make fun of the alt-right and expose them for how ridiculous they are. And there's a couple of places online that I found that are doing that. There's some Twitter channels. Are they called channels when it's on Twitter? I think so, right? There's a few. There's one called the Right Can't Meme on Reddit, which is like a subreddit where people post really, really bad, right-wing memes and stuff. Um, there's a Twitter channel called Conservative Self Owns, which is a good one. Um, and then Conservative Facepalm is another one, right? Some pretty good ones out there. So it's like, meme culture in and of itself, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is not a bad thing. And, it shouldn't be a thing that instantly gets you banned or whatever. Like anything else, it's a tool. It's a tool that, we as people who fight against this stuff should take more advantage of, right? Anyway, so what happens here, is that when you spread shit like this on social media, my hand hurts. I got to take a break here for a second, guys. Hand kind of hurts here. When you spread stuff like this on social media and you click like and all that other thing, the algorithm then takes over, right? So, you go on Facebook or something, or you go on Twitter, you see some funny memes about whatever, somebody's posting some fucking Holocaust thing or whatever, and then you click like on that. Twitter, or let's just take Facebook for example. Facebook then says, hey, we should suggest some other shit to this guy because the way you make money on social media is through traffic, right? So for a very long time with the internet, like maybe, internet, especially in the internet 1.0 days back in the day, it was somewhat of a struggle to figure out how to monetize it, you know. And now companies like Facebook and Twitter and all of that, the way they make their money is through traffic. They figured it out, right? The more traffic they get, the more ads they display, right? And so one way to, drive that traffic is to use an algorithm, right? When someone likes something, then they suggest more of it because that's how they make their money. They want to keep you using the app as long as possible, right? And so you never really, log into Facebook and just hang out there for 5 or 10 minutes, check your status updates, and then leave. At least I don't know. I don't know about you, but I don't. Whenever I go to Facebook, I always end up staying there like at least a good 15, 20 minutes, you know, just looking at shit. And then because it always suggests something else, so you'll look at something, you'll be like, haha, that's funny. You scroll down a little more, you scroll down a little more, especially since everybody is using it and they're always posting shit and you want to see what your best friend just posted, whatever. And before you know it, 2 hours have passed or something, and you've just spent all this time on fucking Facebook, right? Or all this time on Twitter, or all this time on Reddit. Reddit is like a really, really bad one for me. I'm spending way too much fucking time on Reddit, you know, and that's by design. That's by design. It's so that they can, display more ads to you. So that's how they do it, right? And they suggest more content. The content that you click to like on, you get more of that, right? Because that's how they keep you there. So you click on one link, and then before you know it, it starts auto suggesting other links, especially like if you click on a somewhat racist meme or whatever, you start getting more of those, right? Or on YouTube, for example, right? YouTube is a good example of this. You know, you'll do a keyword search on YouTube for gaming, for example, video games. And then that'll bring you up some channels that you'll see, maybe some let's play type videos, maybe some gameplay videos, that kind of stuff like that. Then maybe you'll start getting some commentary, that kind of thing. Then maybe you might be suggested to something like Geeks and Gamers or The Quartering. And it'll be a video about how, like, um, SJWs are taking over video gaming, right? About, it'll be a fucking something like that. And then you'll get suggested, so you'll watch that and you hit like, and then you get suggested some like Gamergate shit, people talking about fucking Anita Sarkeesian or whatever, that kind of thing, Zoe Quinn or whatnot, or, you know, shit like that. And then you watch a few of those, and then you get suggested to Ben Shapiro. You end up in the intellectual dark web, is what they call that, which I'm thinking of doing a video on these guys too. Then you get suggested a Ben Shapiro video or a Jordan Peterson video or a Joe Rogan video, right? And by this point, you're not even like watching content about games anymore, right? But now you're firmly on that track, you know. Then you watch a couple of these guys, and then suddenly it starts suggesting fucking shit about Holocaust denial to you, right? Or race and IQ, the bell curve, right? You watch Joe Rogan's video where they had the author of the fucking bell curve on, and he talks about race and IQ, and then before you know it, you know you're getting all kinds of alt-right shit in your video streams, you know. And this will happen even if you're like watching stuff and not hitting like, they still do it to you. I made a video last week. The last stream we did was about had Nick Fuentes, right? And YouTube is suggesting fucking Nick Fuentes videos to me now. That's just what the algorithm does. It's like I made a video like basically fucking like, making fun of this guy and talking about how his ideology is the worst in the world. The name of my video was Nick Fuentes is terrible, but the algorithm doesn't care and it still suggests this to you anyway. So it's like that's how it works. And this can be very quick, within a couple of days even. Actually, let's undo that. right? So it can be, that algorithm works pretty quick there, and especially if you don't tell it what to do, if you don't sit there and put in "don't show me this video" or whatever, if you let it just work by yourself. Well, if you're a young kid or something like that, right, and you're susceptible to this kind of shit, and the fucking YouTube is telling you, hey, you might like this one, or it doesn't even have to say anything. It could just show up in your feed, and you go, oh, who's this guy? Especially if you don't know who they are. You don't know who Ben Shapiro is, right? You listen to him, you tune into him, you listen to him talk and all that stuff, and it's easy, as a young, ignorant child who doesn't know anything about the world, to fall for these fucking carpetbaggers and scam artists. That's how the shit spreads around, you know. And it's kind of insidious because the things you have to search for, you don't even have to search for um, keywords that have anything to do with politics. It'll be about gaming. It'll be about, you could be searching for the latest Marvel movie thing and get some video by the quartering talking about, fucking how he hates like Captain Marvel so much. You know what I mean? And you get sucked in. You could be searching for another one was She-Ra. You guys ever watch She-Ra, the Netflix She-Ra? You know, these guys made like 5,000 videos talking about how She-Ra's too manly looking and how her boobs aren't big enough, stuff like that. If you're just a casual viewer who like, hey, I wonder if this She-Ra, if this show is any good. My friend told me about it, and then you do a couple of searches, and this is the fucking content that gets suggested to you. You know, another one was Masters of the Universe Revelations. They really fucking hated that. Um, I can't emphasize enough how much they hated Captain Marvel. There were just video after video after video after video of these guys like complaining about Captain Marvel and how the SJWs were taking over, and they really fucking hated Brie Larson and all that. This does a lot to radicalize people. Um, these sort of alt light, YouTubers, people like the Quartering, Geeks and Gamers. Another guy, his name is they're sort of like the first layer, and then you start getting suggested into other sort of people like Baring. There's a guy named Baring who made a video on me actually not that long ago, which is funny because he drove a lot of traffic to my channel. So thanks a lot, Baring. Appreciate that. You know, or you'll get someone like then they'll start suggesting people like Sargon of Akkad and shit like that. Um, the good news is that a lot of these guys, a lot of the more vile, toxic guys, have been deplatformed. But for every person that was deplatformed, there's tons of little channels that don't that have managed to stay under the radar that still get suggested, right? And then before you know it, it's like you're firmly in the algorithm's grasp there, and that's what makes it so dangerous, right? So it's sort of this combination of using memes to hook people in and then letting the algorithm take over, right? And which is why we really did see, like, especially with the social media kind of taking over in the 2010s. You just sort of saw this explosion of fucking like alt-right content, and before you know it, they're voting in like fucking authoritarian presidents and shit. So anyway, I had some more to talk about. Like I was gonna talk about outrage culture a little bit, outrage clicks, that kind of thing. But I think we'll save that for next time. What I do want to do here, though, is I want to take a little bit of time and I want to talk about some of the comments that we got from last week here. Elliot Williams, thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Uh, so, I want to talk about some of the comments because, last week there were a lot of comments here, and I really appreciate that. And I really do go and read every comment as much as I can. Actually, you know what? I don't like how that looks. We're gonna erase this. Um, that doesn't look good right there. But Yeah, I want to, read a few of the comments that we got last week because there were a few that I thought I should respond to. So let's see. Here was one. Let's just start at the beginning. This is from a guy named Justin KG, right? One of the comments from last week here. Justin KG, oh damn, you say sis and shit. About to listen to a lot of bad takes, but can't wait to hear them. Um, yeah, this is kind of something I've been seeing around, you know, um, over the last maybe 6 months and stuff. Ever since like the trans rights kind of moved to the forefront, right? You've been seeing this sort of pushback. Like, if you just even use the language of a trans, activist, then people start fucking with you. Like, so first I said, cis is CIS. That's how it's spelled. It's not SYS, right? But, it's a way of respect, right? Number one, using the right terminology, you know. And also it's accurate. I think this comment was when I said, if you're a cis male married to a cis female, that was the context. And it was like, I just wanted to bring this one up because it was like all I had to do was say a word. I just had to say one word and I got a reaction out of this guy. You know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't like he didn't wait to see what my take on it was. He didn't, it was just the fact that I used the terminology was enough to trigger him, you know, was enough to make him think that I was going to have bad takes on stuff. And I thought that was kind of funny. It's like, wow, man, like, which one of us is like brainwashed here? You know what I mean? Like which one of us is more likely to have bad takes here? The guy that reacts when he hears language a certain way, or like, you know what I mean? I don't know. So I thought that shit was funny. Let's see. Next one. I really hate how it doesn't have the thing until you zoom out. This is from South Florida Groper. A lot of the comments are going to be from these two guys, talking about if Nick Fuentes is religious. So the context here was that Nick Fuentes is a 24-year-old virgin, I think, 23, 24-year-old virgin. Um, and we were talking about that and if he was waiting until marriage, which I don't think he is, but according to this guy, that Nick Fuentes is a hardcore Catholic, and I believe the thinking that cheaters should be stoned like the Taliban. I believe that because he said as much in his interview there. You know, that makes a lot of sense that he would believe people. But I think, though, Nick Fuentes would probably err on the side that women should be stoned for cheating. I don't think he would like the idea of men being stoned to death for cheating. Number one, um, you know, just a feeling. I have no evidence of that, but that's just a feeling that I've got. I don't think he would like the idea of somebody stoning him to death if he were to cheat on his wife or girlfriend. Number two, he may be Catholic. That's no excuse. He's still an incel because I it's been my, and this is just okay. It's been my experience, right, that people that especially the older you get, the harder it is to keep up the facade of religiosity when it comes to things like this, right? It's easy when you're 16 to say, "Hey, I want to wait until marriage before I have sex." Right? Not so easy when you're 26 to say the same, you know, because especially when, and because I'm actually supposed to be a Catholic also. Although I haven't been to church in literally like, 30 years, but still, kind of, I can identify with this a little bit. It's in my background, you know. The thing is, I don't know, like have you ever met someone that was raised and went to like a strict religious school, you know, when they were like a teenager and shit like that, and had a very strict like traditional upbringing? They tend to be the people that party the hardest, right? They do. And there's a reason for that. It's because, you when you're young, you're looking to revolt against your parents a little bit. Even if you don't revolt all the way and go completely against everything they believe in, even if you stay within the framework of the religious, ideology you were raised in or whatever, young people still tend to push the limits, you know. And let's just say that every religious girl that I knew growing up who were like strict and I'm waiting for marriage and all that shit, every single one of them like kind of turned on that the moment they got some like freedom. You know what I mean? They every single one of them either got pregnant out of wedlock or had multiple boyfriends, or let's just say that that shit just flew out the window the moment that their parents weren't holding shit over their heads. So this could just be me talking out of my ass, but I'm just, from my personal, experience, which is, anecdotal, of course, right? So I can't speak for everyone on Earth, but it just seems very unlikely to me, like especially with the way that Nick Fuentes' personal philosophy of me first kind of fascist philosophy that he has. It's very, very not believable for me to think that he's actually waiting until marriage to have sex, right? I really do think that if an attractive woman were to come on to Nick Fuentes, that he would jump on that shit in a nanosecond because I think he's horny as fuck and has been holding it in, right? And I just don't believe it. I don't find it believable that he's super Catholic and doesn't want to have sex until marriage. I think that's just complete and total bullshit. I'm sorry. It's just not, doesn't compute for me. And yeah, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's the one in a million guy out there who actually does believe in all this. But he's also a person that believes that, people who are not white are subhuman. He also doesn't believe women should be able to vote. He also wants, to get rid of democracy and shit like that. And it just seems, people who tend to believe in that shit also don't usually believe that one should wait until marriage to have sex. Not for the man, at least. They might want women to wait until marriage to have sex, but not for the man. No, the man in these, men's rights. I mean, he was talking about men's rights shit. He was talking about fucking, you know, talking about fucking like pickup artists and stuff like that. These guys tend to believe that men should have as much sex as humanly possible, that it's their right to have as much sex as they can, and that women are the ones that are supposed to remain celibate until marriage. So, sorry, I just don't buy it. I think, I think fucking, Nick Fuentes is a fucking, has just not managed to like get any woman to like, take their panties off for him because he's a fucking disgusting bridge troll. That's what I think. And he's hiding. He's using his religion to fucking hide it. That's what I think. Anyway, here's another one. Cody Course. One of your comments I wanted to talk to about. Fuentes says he wants the 50s back. Not shocking. So many white nationalists are traditionalists. If they had their way, white women would have at least 3 kids by law. And I think you are 100% correct. I really do think that a lot of white nationalists, like there's a big overlap with white nationalism and men's rights and that sort of traditional family, that's what they want. And it's because, they want it to be like exactly what you're saying. They want it to be like in the 50s where the man was in charge. Another reason why is because back then, basically you could do anything you wanted, you know, And to get divorced was sort of, there was like social stigma involved there. So people would be like, women would be in unhappy marriages for decades, but they couldn't get divorced. First off, because they couldn't get jobs, so they wouldn't be able to support themselves if they left. If they left the marriage, they'd have nothing. Secondly, because there was a big social stigma attached to that too. You know, you were seen as used goods. You were fucking like a dirty whore if you like divorced your husband or whatever, right? And also at that sort of patriarchal, you know, misogyny, I guess, that was sort of ingrained into American culture, right? Which it still is to a big extent. Like I was saying before, the man was allowed to cheat and womanize as much as they want. You know, go back, watch some of them old movies and shit. Read some of the literature from back then, and not just that, but like magazines and stuff like that. Men were, it was like, I mean, it was still bad, right? But nobody alienated you for cheating on your wife. You know, yeah, you weren't supposed to fucking do it, but it was like kind of, the woman cheating on the man was like 10 times worse than the man cheating on the woman. Like, man could do whatever the fuck he wants. He could go out and bang all the fucking prostitutes and shit, have like a mistress and all that other baloney, but your wife was expected to stay home and like take care of kids and like fucking cook, make meatloaf and shit, and just be like this, and cover it up if you got caught cheating. It's like, oh, you don't want anybody to know, right? If the man gets caught cheating, if she figures out that he's got a mistress, the whole point was to like keep it on the down low so that it wouldn't get out and people wouldn't gossip and shit like that. So yeah, you're exactly right, and you're exactly right. A lot of these guys wanted to be like that because men were in charge. So it's like not only were they in charge with their wives and stuff and their families, and there was no divorce, nothing like that. They were also in charge, socially, when it came to white privilege and the minorities and stuff like lived in different parts of town. Yeah, right. And they got paid less and stuff. And it was like, they knew that they were at the top of the totem pole, I guess is what it is. So that's definitely true. Let's move on. What else do we have here? Here's another one from Justin KG. Do you think women are happy in America or Afghanistan? I did answer that first part. I bet women in Afghanistan are happier than American women. Maybe men don't want whores. Right. That's what I wanted to respond to here. This maybe men don't want whores. You're a smart guy, but not wise. So I did address this one in the last stream. I do personally believe that, you know, women in the United States are way, way, way happier than they are in Afghanistan. I think that is, 100%. If you were to get 100 women from Afghanistan and ask them if they could, like, come to America where they don't have all of the baggage and bullshit they have to deal with, where they're not in danger, right? They don't have to worry about acid attacks, stuff like that. They don't have to, they can, like, get jobs, they can go to school, they can plan their families. If you were to say all that, you can do that, you can come here, or, you can stay in Afghanistan. I think 100% of them would probably come to the United States. I think if you were to compare how happy women say they are in Afghanistan to how happy they are in the United States, I think 100% of them would say they were more happy in the United States for sure. Right. This third one, maybe men don't want whores. Here's the thing about that, right? Have you ever considered, why is it always men don't want whores? How come it's never the other way around, right? Why is it okay for men to go out and whore around and have as much sex as humanly possible and bang everything it moves? How come it's okay for men to do that but not women? Why do women have to be like vestigial virgins and shit? until the day they get married, and then they're only allowed to have sex with one person ever for the rest of their lives. Whereas the men can have like, six, seven, like, girlfriends at once, right? And, and they get applauded for getting as much pussy as possible. Why does that work? I never understood that because these same kinds of people, right? You would think, since they like to have lots of sex and they want to have sex with as many women as they can, you would think they would want women to be promiscuous. Wouldn't you say? Doesn't that make a lot of sense? Wouldn't you think that, hey, the more women that are out there that are actually like, who like having sex, then that increases my chances of getting laid? You know? So you would think incels would want women to be promiscuous. You would think they would want women to like having sex and like having, because that means that they're more likely to have sex with you. But no, it doesn't fit. It doesn't, that's not what they want. They want their woman to be like, you know, some fucking, that only she was like a virgin until you get married and she's only for you. And then she does exactly what you want and she cooks and cleans and filletes you on command and shit like that. And, you know, yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it has a lot to do with what you said last time, Cody, about how they want it to be like the 1950s. I don't know. The traditional family bullshit is just complete. Doesn't make any fucking sense to me whatsoever. This last thing here also, where Justin is talking about Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle said he was the best wrestler because he was abstinent. If you're not distracted by women and other things, you can focus on work. That's bullshit. Kurt Angle, by the way, is a former Olympic wrestler who like won gold medals in like the 90s and then went on to wrestle for the WWE and shit like that and was like the world champion and blah 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 blah. Kurt Angle is also married, so he was married like for 30 years. So no, Kurt Angle was not celibate. So yeah, that doesn't make any sense there, Justin. Let's see. This one I thought was funny. Um, I just thought the shit was funny here. His audience are made up, are mad up. I guess he forgot the E. His audience are made up of hot and bulging muscle strong men. I saw them outside my house and it almost turned me gay when Alex Jones flexed his big biceps to crush a beer can into Nick's powerful maw. Yeah, getting a little steamy there, man. You know, a little homoerotic there with the with the Graper Army. I don't know. I thought that shit was funny. You know. See, we can disagree on things and still admit when somebody says something hilarious. And Shoma, I don't think you're on the stream today, but here's one of your comments. Elite corporatists and their almighty donors have taken over this nation regardless if they call themselves Democrats or Republicans, and most of their voters are too blind to see this. Exclamation point. Preach. Yes, that is definitely true. And that's something that we all need to acknowledge that, there is, okay, I've made a few videos about this too, where people talk about both sides being the same, right? Um, that is, it's true to a point. What I think a better description of that, it's not that both sides are the same, is that both sides have a conservative corporatist wing, right? And it just so happens that the Democratic side they seem to be more dominant by corporatists, but they're more progressive when it comes to social issues, things like gay marriage, things like trans rights, stuff like that. They're very much more, receptive to that. But there is a massively huge corporatist wing that prevents a lot of progressive policies from getting passed. Perfect example, Build Back Better is dead and buried. It's not going to happen, right? Which we all kind of figured that was the case when they split those two bills in half, when they moved the infrastructure out of Build Back Better That instant they did that, I said it's dead. That's it. We're gonna get the infrastructure one because that had some Republican backing because that gives the corporatists what they want, which is to give tax breaks and contracts to to corporations, right? And then the Build Back Better part, that was the part that was supposed to give people education. It was supposed to increase, funding for welfare programs for things like K through 12, or, pre-K education, stuff like that. It was supposed to expand the ACA so that things like red states who never set up the exchanges would have access to the exchanges for the first time. It was gonna expand Medicare. That was the one that was actually gonna help everybody, and they got rid of that because they don't want that. They don't want that because that actually costs money, and they're really only interested in cutting taxes and giving government money to their their rich criminal friends, right? And the Democrats are very much you know, responsible for that as well. A lot of media attention is being given to people like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin for this, right? And they deserve it because they've kind of taken the lead on this and made themselves the bad guys, right? But if it wasn't them, it would be somebody else. They're not the only corporatist Democrats out there, right? It would be somebody else. Somebody would stand up and block it because the corporatist wing, of the Democratic Party doesn't want this. And this is just the reality of our political system, where this is where both parties get the majority of their money is from corporations and special interests. And the thing is that the Democratic side, the non-corporatist, the progressive side, is getting stronger, but they're not there yet. They're not, the Bernie wing, the AOC wing, right? The Rashida Tlaib, those people. They're getting there, but they're still not strong enough to dictate the direction that the party goes. You know, maybe we just got to keep working at it. I think because I really, I think at this point the Republican Party is dead, dead and gone, buried. They don't give a fuck about you at all. Like every single one of them. I can't name one Republican that stands up for anything, right? For any principles whatsoever, who gives a shit about normal, ordinary people. I can't name one, you know? Even like the far right people like fucking John McCain. He was probably the last one that I could probably think of that I would one day entertain voting for. He's gone. All those people, they all left. They all left the party when Trump took over. Like, first there was a big wave when all the Tea Party people took over, and then when Trump took over, there was like, six or seven, other senators and shit who all just like decided to either quit or not run again because they saw the way it's going. It's too radical for them now, right? So we can't depend on them whatsoever to do anything good for anybody ever again. The only people that we can really depend on, in my opinion, is the non-corporatist wing of the Democratic Party, which is really fucking sad. That's a sad state of affairs, and that's why nothing is actually getting done in the country right now. Like, when we do get something like this infrastructure bill, well, that'll do a little bit of good. I think that right now, that's the best that we can fucking ask for, which is really sad. So, I don't know. The country is fucked up, folks. Let's see. A few more here. Oh, I can just use the wheel. Okay. Justin KG, I'm not going to report you. I want to hear reactions to this video. You sound like every corporation pushing the current ideologue. I'm not sure what you mean by I sound like every corporation. Are you talking about, you know, the fact that I like democracy? Like, is that what I mean, I know this guy isn't in the stream, so he can't answer me. I don't know, maybe one day he might check it out. I don't understand that. First off, corporations are not pushing for democracy, like, at all, right? They don't care one way or the other. Like, they just want to make their money, so how is me speaking out against fascists, how is that a pro corporatist thing? fascism and corporatism kind of go hand in hand. I mean, that's really the definition of fascism. If you were to take Mussolini's definition of fascism, it's like the melding of corporations with government. That's like literally what he defined fascism as. So, no, me speaking out against fascism is not, a corporatist viewpoint. It's kind of the opposite. So, I don't know. I thought that was kind of dumb and needed to be responded to. Here's the same guy. This is where we were talking about Jim Crow laws. And Justin KG, who says that he's black, says this: the country was prosperous under those laws. The country is dying without those laws. Go figure, and I'm black. So I would like to see how one comes to the conclusion that it was voting rights which has caused the American decline, right? That seems kind of backward to me. It seems more like the decline in voting rights to me is what's causing the decline of the country, right? You can like, excuse me, sorry, drinking soda and shit making me burp. you know, it's really, what's actually causing the decline of the United States is that the fact that the empire is starting to crumble around the edges. You know, we spend too much money on the military. Even this year, they got an extra $25 billion that they didn't ask for in their budgets. And the reason why that happens is because of pork spending, because you have states where, spending on the military is big business, right? Everybody wants to get their pork project in there so that they can bring jobs to their district. So they can say, hey, I created jobs here. Easiest way to create jobs is to get a government contract. Well, what's the big thing that the government spends money on in this country? you know, is the military. So that's why they're building shit like airplanes and jet fighters that don't fucking work and all that all that other shit, and giving them money that they didn't ask for. You know, I mean, and plus there's also a lot of corruption and stuff too. Spending $28,000 on a toilet seat, that kind of thing. That's obviously another thing also. But that's what's really causing the decline of the United States. That and also, the Republican Party, right? Who kind of takes over every 8 years or so, fucks everything up, and then leaves the Democrats to kind of clean up their fucking mess, which has happened again, again and again. We could do a stream on that too, kind of tracing, I think that might be an interesting stream if we were to go through and examine the boom bust cycle, see how it corresponds with administrations, because it's kind of a pattern that's been repeating for 30 years, at this point, right? Jimmy Carter comes in, we get good economic growth or whatever at the end of, the fucking oil crisis, something like that. Ronald Reagan comes in and then sort of cuts a bunch of taxes. You get a spike, and then that causes a bubble to form, which causes a recession. You know, Bill Clinton comes in, you start right when the recession is bad, start recovering out of the recession, shit like that. George W. Bush gets elected, causes a fucking huge bubble. This time in the 80s it was the savings and loan industry, and then this time it was the housing bubble in 2008. Fucking economy completely crashes, right? And then the shit happens again. Obama gets elected, kind of digs us out of the hole that Bush left us in, right? When everything's looking good, Trump gets elected, fucks up the economy all over again, right? And now we've elected another Democrat to dig us out of this hole. That it just seems to be a repeating pattern. At this point, I think we have enough evidence now, going back 30 years, to show that that's kind of what happens. Uh, things are shitty, right? They elect a Democrat. The Democrat sort of like oversees the country getting back to normal. Things get good. They elect a Republican who cuts taxes, creates a bubble, and fucks up the economy again. And that's what's actually destroying the country, right? That's why the country's not prosperous right now at this moment. This is why we have all these problems, because we had a pandemic which a Republican president completely botched the response to and fucked everything up. It didn't have to be like that. If we would have took proper measures, you know, like New Zealand, for example, you know, we wouldn't have like this problem that we have now. But we didn't take proper fucking measures. We politicized everything to the point where 50% of Republicans won't get vaccinated, you know. And now the pandemic has been ongoing for 2 fucking years. Yeah, that's a big shock to the economy. That's the reason why the fucking country isn't prosperous. I don't know. Kind of ridiculous. Anyway, guys, there are some more here. I think what I'll just do is I'll just make a separate video and respond to some of those, and then also to some of the comments that we got in here today, because I'm seeing some cool comments here that I want to respond to. Next week, we're going to be talking about outrage merchants and how that is also another recruitment tool for the alt-right. You know, outrage posting, stuff like that. In the meantime, I think we're going to go ahead and end this. I have to go get my booster shot, so that's why we're leaving a little early here. But if you like what I do and you want to see more of my work, you can check me out on DeviantArt. This is my DeviantArt site here. Come see. I actually posted a new comic. Got a new Hawanja comic here with ninjas and stuff, fireballs, that kind of thing. People getting punched in the face, stuff like that. So please come check me out on DeviantArt. If you like what I do and you want to support me monetarily, you can buy something from my Etsy shop. I'll put this down in the bottom as well. Made a new one here. This is the Spawn of Cthulhu print, so you can buy something if you like. If you want to keep me going, if you want to give me money for doing my live streams, please consider buying something. If you want to, if you like what I do and you want to give me like $1 a month or something like that, I do have a Patreon, which doesn't seem to be coming up right now. That kind of sucks. Here's my Patreon. You can, oh wait, did it post the, oh wait, no, that's the wrong link. Ha ha ha. Let me just remove that. Wrong one. Wonder why my Patreon isn't coming up right now. That's kind of strange. But anyway, here's the link to the Patreon. I'll just put that down there. I also have a web comic here that you saw before. If you want to read the rest of it, it is at hawanja.com. Fun for the whole stupid family if you want to get the whole thing. So you can check that out there. It's got sword fighting. It's got ninjas and shit like that. People getting beat up. Monsters, etc., etc. Then I also have another YouTube channel. If you want to see me talk about stuff that has nothing to do with politics, toy reviews and game reviews and shit like that, please check me out on UCD Videos. And I also have an Instagram here that I am starting to use a little more. Because, got to stay hip, got to stay up with what the kids are doing, right? Hang on a second, let me find it. I have to search for it. I don't even have it, saved. Hey, come on, find my Instagram, damn it. Shit. It's not finding it. It's finding somebody else's fucking thing. I do have an Instagram. Wow. Anyway, it's Dirty Kitchen Press. That's my Instagram. So, you know what? I'll put it down in the description. I can't find it now. I don't know what's going on with it. Anyway, I do have an Instagram, so I'll put it down in the bottom if you guys want to say it. Hey, Anshoma, how you doing? Thanks for joining. I'm actually just about to end. Sorry, dude. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate that. I really do have to get going. Sorry. So thank you, Cody Course. Great to see you. Thank you, Lewis a Hedgehog. Awesome to see you, as always. Elliot Williams, thank you for joining. Crystal Gregory, thank you for joining. Haven't seen you here before. Awesome. And of course, Nshoma, thanks for joining. I actually spoke to one of your comments there, Raph. later in the stream. So if you want to rewind and watch that part. Anyway, you guys are great. And I got to leave here. I will be seeing you, of course, next week at 11 a.m. We're going to be talking about outrage posting, outrage emergence, and anger as a driver to recruitment from the alt right. That's all I got, folks. Adios.